The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, clear as daylight, through Sarah's trembling fingers. At 19, she had dreamed of this moment differently, married, stable, ready. Instead, she sat on the cold bathroom floor of her childhood home, her world spinning as reality crashed down around her. The father was Marcus, her college boyfriend of 2 years, the one person she thought she could count on when everything else felt uncertain. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah wiped her tears and walked downstairs to find her mother, Linda, arranging fresh flowers in the kitchen. Linda had always been the picture of suburban perfection. Designer clothes, immaculate makeup, every hair in place even at 7 in the morning. She ran the local charity committee and hosted dinner parties that the whole neighborhood talked about for weeks. "Mom, I need to tell you something," Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper. Linda looked up from her roses, and for a moment, Sarah saw something flicker across her mother's face. Not the surprise she expected, but something darker, more calculating. "I'm pregnant," Sarah said, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. Linda's perfectly manicured hands stilled on the flower stems. She set down her scissors with deliberate precision and turned to face her daughter fully. Sarah expected shock, disappointment, maybe anger. What she didn't expect was the cold smile that spread across her mother's lips. "Well," Linda said, her voice eerily calm, "this changes everything, doesn't it?" Before Sarah could ask what she meant, Linda continued, "Marcus called here yesterday. Did you know that? He was looking for you, said he'd been trying to reach you all week." Sarah's heart leaped with hope, but Linda wasn't finished. "I told him you'd moved on, that you were seeing someone else now, someone more appropriate." The hope died in Sarah's chest. "You what? Mom, why would you—" "Because, sweetheart," Linda interrupted, straightening her pearl necklace, "some mistakes are too expensive to keep around. Marcus comes from nothing. His family has nothing. You think I spent 19 years grooming you to throw it all away on some mechanic's son who works at a garage?" Sarah stared at her mother as if seeing her for the first time. "He's studying engineering. He has a scholarship." "Had a scholarship," Linda corrected. "I made a few calls to the university. Apparently, his financial aid coordinator is a dear friend of mine from the country club. Funny how quickly academic probation can affect funding when the right concerns are raised about a student's character." The room tilted around Sarah. "You destroyed his education because of me?" Linda's smile widened. "I protected our family's reputation. There's a difference." She moved closer, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Now about this pregnancy. I've already made some calls. Dr. Harrison can see you tomorrow morning. Very discreet, very clean. No one ever has to know." Sarah's hands instinctively moved to her stomach. "I'm not getting an abortion." "Yes, you are." Linda's voice turned steel cold. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure Marcus disappears completely. Not just from college, from everything. I have connections, Sarah, more than you know." The threat hung between them like poison gas, and Sarah felt something break inside her chest. This wasn't the mother who had read her bedtime stories and bandaged her scraped knees. This was a stranger wearing her mother's face, speaking words that cut deeper than any physical blow ever could. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Linda's expression softened slightly, but the coldness remained in her eyes. "Because I love you too much to let you ruin your life. You're going to thank me someday." That night, Sarah lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling covered with glow-in-the-dark stars she'd put up when she was 10. Everything felt surreal, like she was trapped in someone else's nightmare. She thought about Marcus, probably wondering why she'd suddenly stopped returning her calls, not knowing that her mother had systematically destroyed his future to keep them apart. She tried calling him, but his number went straight to voicemail. When she tried his dorm room, his roommate said he'd packed up and left campus 3 days ago. No forwarding address, no explanation, just gone like he'd never existed at all. The next morning, Linda appeared at Sarah's bedroom door dressed in her best navy suit, car keys jingling in her hand. "Time to go, sweetheart. Dr. Harrison is waiting." Sarah sat up slowly, her decision crystallized overnight like ice forming on a window. "I'm not going." Linda's composure cracked slightly. "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. This is what's best for everyone." "No," Sarah said, standing up and facing her mother with strength she didn't know she possessed. "This is what's best for you, for your reputation, for your perfect image at the country club. But I won't murder my child to keep up your appearances." The slap came so fast Sarah barely saw it coming. Her cheek burned as Linda stood over her, breathing hard, her perfect facade finally slipping completely. "You ungrateful little bitch! After everything I've given you, everything I've sacrificed, this is how you repay me? By throwing your life away on some bastard child from a mechanic's son who works at a garage?" Sarah stared at her mother as if seeing her for the first time. "He's studying engineering. He has a scholarship." "Had a scholarship," Linda corrected. "I made a few calls to the university. Apparently, his financial aid coordinator is a dear friend of mine from the country club. Funny how quickly academic probation can affect funding when the right concerns are raised about a student's character." The room tilted around Sarah. "You destroyed his education because of me?" Linda's smile widened. "I protected our family's reputation. There's a difference." She moved closer, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Now about this pregnancy. I've already made some calls. Dr. Harrison can see you tomorrow morning. Very discreet, very clean. No one ever has to know." Sarah's hands instinctively moved to her stomach. "I'm not getting an abortion." "Yes, you are." Linda's voice turned steel cold. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure Marcus disappears completely. Not just from college, from everything. I have connections, Sarah, more than you know." The threat hung between them like poison gas, and Sarah felt something break inside her chest. This wasn't the mother who had read her bedtime stories and bandaged her scraped knees. This was a stranger wearing her mother's face, speaking words that cut deeper than any physical blow ever could. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Linda's expression softened slightly, but the coldness remained in her eyes. "Because I love you too much to let you ruin your life. You're going to thank me someday." That night, Sarah lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling covered with glow-in-the-dark stars she'd put up when she was 10. Everything felt surreal, like she was trapped in someone else's nightmare. She thought about Marcus, probably wondering why she'd suddenly stopped returning her calls, not knowing that her mother had systematically destroyed his future to keep them apart. She tried calling him, but his number went straight to voicemail. When she tried his dorm room, his roommate said he'd packed up and left campus 3 days ago. No forwarding address, no explanation, just gone like he'd never existed at all. The next morning, Linda appeared at Sarah's bedroom door dressed in her best navy suit, car keys jingling in her hand. "Time to go, sweetheart. Dr. Harrison is waiting." Sarah sat up slowly, her decision crystallized overnight like ice forming on a window. "I'm not going." Linda's composure cracked slightly. "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. This is what's best for everyone." "No," Sarah said, standing up and facing her mother with strength she didn't know she possessed. "This is what's best for you, for your reputation, for your perfect image at the country club. But I won't murder my child to keep up your appearances." The slap came so fast Sarah barely saw it coming. Her cheek burned as Linda stood over her, breathing hard, her perfect facade finally slipping completely. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I've given you, everything I've sacrificed, this is how you repay me? By throwing your life away on some bastard child from a mechanic's son who works at a garage?" Sarah stared at her mother as if seeing her for the first time. "He's studying engineering. He has a scholarship." "Had a scholarship," Linda corrected. "I made a few calls to the university. Apparently, his financial aid coordinator is a dear friend of mine from the country club. Funny how quickly academic probation can affect funding when the right concerns are raised about a student's character." The room tilted around Sarah. "You destroyed his education because of me?" Linda's smile widened. "I protected our family's reputation. There's a difference." She moved closer, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Now about this pregnancy. I've already made some calls. Dr. Harrison can see you tomorrow morning. Very discreet, very clean. No one ever has to know." Sarah's hands instinctively moved.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
She was 19, pregnant, and completely alone in the world, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Her father had died when she was 15, and Linda had systematically cut ties with his family afterward, claiming they were beneath their standards. Sarah's few friends were away at college, living the life she should have been living if her world hadn't imploded in a single morning. She walked to the bus station with her suitcases bumping behind her on the cracked sidewalk, past the manicured lawns and perfect houses that had once represented her entire world. Now they looked like prison cells, each one hiding its own secrets behind pristine facades. The bus ticket to the city cost most of her remaining money, but Sarah didn't care. She needed to get as far away from her mother's poison as possible. As the bus pulled away from everything she'd ever known, Sarah pressed her hand to her still, flat stomach and made a promise to the life growing inside her. "I don't know how yet," she whispered, "but I'm going to give you everything she tried to take away from us. Love, honesty, a real family. Everything." The city was overwhelming at first. Too loud, too fast, too indifferent to her pain. Sarah found a room in a boarding house run by an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, who asked no questions and accepted the last of Sarah's money for a month's rent in advance. The room was tiny, barely larger than her childhood closet, with a single window that looked out onto a fire escape and the brick wall of the building next door. Sarah found work at a local diner called Mel's, where the owner, a gruff man in his 60s named Mel Kowalski, hired her on the spot when she mentioned she needed the job to support herself and her coming baby. "Kid needs a chance," he said simply, handing her an apron. "Everyone deserves that." The work was hard, long hours on her feet, difficult customers, wages that barely covered her basic needs. But Mel and his wife Rose treated Sarah like family, and for the first time since leaving home, she felt like maybe she could survive this. As her pregnancy progressed, Sarah tried several times to reach Marcus. She called his parents' house, but his mother said he'd joined the military and was stationed overseas. When Sarah tried to explain who she was, the line went dead. Later attempts went straight to an automated message saying the number was no longer in service. It was as if Linda had erased him from existence entirely. Sarah gave birth to her son Daniel on a rainy Tuesday in March. Holding him for the first time, she felt a love so fierce and protective it frightened her. This tiny person was depending on her completely, and she would die before she let anyone hurt him, the way her mother had hurt her. For the first few years, life was a constant struggle. Sarah worked double shifts when she could, relying on Rose to watch Daniel during the day. She lived paycheck to paycheck. But Daniel was healthy and happy, and that was all that mattered. When Daniel turned 4, Sarah made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. She was struggling to pay for his medical bills after a bout of pneumonia, and in a moment of desperation, she called her mother. Linda's voice was exactly the same, cool, controlled, superior. "Sarah, it's been a long time." "I need help," Sarah said, swallowing her pride. "Daniel's sick, and I can't afford—" "Daniel," Linda interrupted. "You named it Daniel?" The casual cruelty in her mother's voice, referring to her grandson as "it,"
nearly made Sarah hang up. But Daniel's fever had been so high the night before, and the doctors wanted to run more tests. "He's your grandson," Sarah said quietly. Linda was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a strange note Sarah couldn't identify. "Bring him to see me this weekend. If I'm going to help, I need to meet him first." Sarah's every instinct screamed against it, but Daniel needed that help. Against her better judgment, she agreed. The house looked exactly the same. Perfect lawn, perfect flowers, perfect facade hiding the rot underneath. Linda answered the door wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Sarah made in a month. But when her eyes fell on Daniel, something shifted in her expression. Daniel was a beautiful child. Dark curls, bright eyes, a smile that could melt the hardest heart. He hid behind Sarah's legs at first, shy around the stranger, but Linda knelt down to his level and spoke to him in a voice Sarah remembered from her own childhood. "Hello, Daniel. I'm your grandmother. Would you like to see the garden? I have a swing set out back that used to belong to your mommy." Something cold settled in Sarah's stomach as she watched her mother charm her son. This was the Linda she remembered before everything went wrong. Warm, engaging, loving. It was also the most dangerous version of her mother because it made her seem almost human. They spent the afternoon in the backyard, Daniel playing on the old swing set while Linda and Sarah sat on the porch. To anyone watching, they would have looked like a normal family enjoying a pleasant day together. "He's beautiful," Linda said, watching Daniel chase butterflies around the flower beds. "He looks just like you did at that age." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "She'd been thinking," Linda continued, her voice taking on that familiar, calculating tone, "about your situation. It can't be easy, raising him alone, working all those hours. He needs stability, Sarah. A proper home, good schools, opportunities." Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. "He has those things." Linda's laugh was soft, but cutting. "A boarding house room and a diner job? Come now, Sarah. We both know you're barely getting by." The worst part was that Linda wasn't wrong. Sarah was barely getting by, and she worried constantly about whether she was giving Daniel everything he deserved. "What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked carefully. Linda's smile was the same one she'd worn the day she'd destroyed Sarah's life. "Move back home, both of you. I've mellowed with age, and Daniel deserves to know his family. His real family." Sarah looked at her son, laughing as he pushed himself higher on the swing, and felt the familiar trap closing around her. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Linda said smoothly. "Just a chance for us to be a family again. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" That night, Sarah lay in her narrow bed in the boarding house, Daniel sleeping peacefully beside her, and wrestled with the most difficult decision of her life. Her mother was offering them a way out of poverty, a chance for Daniel to have the advantages she'd never been able to give him, but it meant trusting the woman who had betrayed her so completely. In the end, it was Daniel's happiness that decided her. He'd talked about the big house and the swing set all evening, asking when they could visit Grandma Linda again. He deserved better than the cramped room and the uncertainty that defined their vainly existence. Sarah called her mother the next morning. "We'll come, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I make the decisions about Daniel's upbringing. You don't interfere with how I parent him. And if you ever try to manipulate him the way you manipulated me, we're gone." Linda agreed so quickly that Sarah should have known something was wrong. But she was exhausted from years of struggling alone, and the promise of help, even from Linda, felt like salvation. Moving back into her childhood home was surreal. Her old room had been converted into Linda's office, so Sarah and Daniel shared the guest room down the hall. Linda had bought Daniel a whole new wardrobe and filled a toy box with expensive games and puzzles. To him, it was like Christmas morning every day. For the first few weeks, things seemed almost normal. Linda doted on Daniel, taking him shopping and to the park, showing him off to her country club friends as her precious grandson. Sarah found a job at a medical office nearby, her first real career opportunity in years. But slowly, subtly, Linda began to undermine Sarah's authority. When Sarah said no candy before dinner, Linda would slip Daniel chocolate when she thought Sarah wasn't watching. When Sarah set bedtimes, Linda would keep Daniel up late watching movies. When Sarah tried to discipline him, Linda would swoop in as the loving grandmother who never said no. "You're too strict with him," Linda would say when Sarah confronted her. "He's just a child. Let him enjoy being young." The real breaking point came 6 months after they'd moved in. Sarah came home from work to find Daniel crying in his room, Linda nowhere to be found.
When Sarah asked what was wrong, Daniel's words shattered her world. "Grandma Linda said, 'You don't really want me,'" he sobbed. "She said if you really loved me, you wouldn't have to work so much. She said maybe it would be better if I just lived with her all the time." Sarah felt the familiar rage building in her chest, the same fury she'd felt at 19 when Linda had destroyed her relationship with Marcus. But this was worse, because now Linda was poisoning her son's mind against her. She found Linda in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. Linda looked up with feigned innocence. "About what, dear?" "You know exactly what. Stay away from my son's head, Linda. I mean it." Linda set down her knife and faced Sarah fully. "Your son? Seems to me he's as much mine as yours, considering who's providing for him now, who's giving him a real home, real opportunities. I'm his mother." "Are you?" Linda's smile was razor sharp. "Because mothers don't abandon their children to work 60 hours a week. Mothers don't drag their babies to live in slums. Mothers put their children's needs before their own pride." Sarah felt the old, familiar helplessness creeping in, the same feeling that had paralyzed her at 19. But she wasn't 19 anymore, and she'd learned to recognize Linda's manipulation tactics. "You're doing it again," Sarah said quietly, "just like before, trying to make me doubt myself, trying to make me believe I'm not good enough." Linda's mask slipped slightly. "I'm trying to give my grandson the life he deserves." "No. You're trying to take him away from me, just like you took Marcus away." Something flickered in Linda's eyes at Marcus's name. "Marcus was a mistake. I saved you from making the biggest error of your life. You destroyed his future to protect your reputation." "I protected our family." Linda's voice rose slightly before she caught herself. "And I'll protect Daniel too, even if it means protecting him from you." That night, Sarah made plans to leave. She had some money saved, enough for a deposit on a small apartment across town. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs, free from Linda's poison. But when Sarah woke up the next morning, Linda was gone. So was Daniel. The note was on the kitchen table, written in Linda's perfect script. "Gone to visit friends for the weekend, back Sunday. Don't worry, he's safe." But Sunday came and went with no word. Then Monday, then Tuesday. Sarah called the police, but Linda hadn't technically kidnapped Daniel. As his grandmother, she had some rights, and there was no evidence he was in danger. Sarah spent 3 days in hell, not knowing where her son was or whether she'd ever see him again. When Linda finally returned, Daniel ran to Sarah with tears in his eyes. "I missed you, Mommy," he sobbed. "Grandma Linda said we were going on an adventure, but I just wanted to come home." Sarah held her son tight, breathing in the scent of his hair, promising herself this would never happen again. But when she looked at Linda over Daniel's head, her mother's smile was triumphant. "We had a wonderful time, didn't we, Daniel? Grandma showed you so many new places." The message was clear. Linda could take Daniel any time she wanted, and there was nothing Sarah could do to stop her. That night, as Sarah tucked Daniel into bed, he looked up at her with confused eyes. "Mommy, why didn't you come with us on the adventure?" "I wanted to," Sarah said carefully, "but Grandma Linda didn't invite me. She said you were too busy working to spend time with me. She said she loves me more than you do because she has time for me." Her heart shattered. Linda wasn't just trying to take Daniel away, she was poisoning his mind against her own mother, making him doubt the love that had sustained them both through years of struggle. "That's not true, baby," Sarah whispered, smoothing his dark curls. "I love you more than anything in the world.
Everything I do is for you." But she could see the doubt in his eyes, the seed Linda had planted taking root. And Sarah realized with growing horror that her mother was playing a long game, one that would end with Daniel choosing Linda over her. The pattern continued for months. Linda would undermine Sarah's authority, shower Daniel with gifts and attention, then make subtle comments about how much better his life would be if Sarah weren't constantly working, constantly stressed, constantly failing to provide what he really needed. Sarah tried to fight back, tried to counter Linda's manipulation with truth and consistency, but Linda had advantages Sarah couldn't compete with: unlimited money, unlimited time, and decades of experience in psychological warfare. The final blow came on Daniel's 6th birthday. Linda threw him an elaborate party at the country club, inviting dozens of children Sarah had never met, their wealthy parents looking at her with a mixture of pity and disdain. Daniel was overwhelmed with expensive gifts, a bicycle, video games, toys that cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. But the worst gift came last. Linda handed Daniel a small wrapped box with a conspiratorial smile. "This one's special, just between you and me." Inside was a cell phone, a real smartphone, something Sarah had been planning to get him when he was older, but attached to it was a note that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. "So you can always call Grandma Linda when Mommy's too busy." Sarah watched her 6-year-old son's face light up with joy, completely unaware that he was holding a leash disguised as a gift. Linda had just given herself direct access to Daniel's mind, bypassing Sarah entirely. That night, after the guests had gone home and Daniel had fallen asleep surrounded by his new toys, Sarah confronted her mother one last time. "This has to stop," she said. "You're confusing him, making him choose sides. He's just a child." Linda was cleaning up the party remnants, her movements precise and controlled. "He's my grandson. I have the right to spoil him." "You're not spoiling him. You're weaponizing him against me." Linda paused in her cleaning and looked at Sarah with something that might have been pity. "You know what your problem is, Sarah. You've never understood that love isn't just about feelings, it's about action. I'm acting in Daniel's best interests, even if you can't see it. By turning him against a mother? By showing him what real security looks like, what a stable home feels like, what it means to be truly wanted and cherished." The implication was clear. Linda believed Sarah was incapable of providing those things, and after months of constant undermining, Sarah was beginning to believe it herself. "I want us to leave," Sarah said quietly. "Daniel and me. We'll find our own place again." Linda's smile was cold as winter. "With what money? You think that little medical office job is going to support you both? You think Daniel wants to go back to living in a single room, eating cereal for dinner, wondering if Mommy can afford his school clothes?" Every word was a knife twist, because every word was true. Sarah had been treading water for years, barely keeping them both afloat. Linda was offering them a life she could never provide on her own. "Besides," Linda continued, "Daniel gets a say now, doesn't he? He's old enough to know what he wants." The threat hung in the air between them. If Sarah tried to take Daniel away, Linda would ask him to choose. And after months of manipulation, after being showered with gifts and attention and promises of security, what 6-year-old wouldn't choose the grandmother who gave him everything over the mother who struggled to give him enough? Sarah felt the trap closing around her again, just like it had 25 years ago. Linda had found her weakness, her love for her son.
"You win," Sarah whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Linda's smile was radiant. "We all win, dear. That's what family is about." But as Sarah looked at her mother's triumphant face, she made a silent promise. She would find a way out of this. She would find a way to protect her son from Linda's poison. She just needed time to figure out how. What Sarah didn't know was that the key to her freedom was hidden in a secret Linda had been keeping for 25 years, a secret that would shatter everything Linda had built her life around. And it was about to come to light in the most unexpected way possible. The breaking point came 3 months later when Sarah discovered Daniel crying in the bathroom, trying to wash marker off his face.
The marks formed crude letters spelling liar across his forehead in blue permanent ink. "What happened?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside him and gently taking the washcloth from his small hands. Daniel's bottom lip trembled as he looked up at her. "Tommy Peterson at school said I don't have a real daddy. He said Grandma Linda told his mom that you made up stories about my father because you were ashamed." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Linda had been spreading rumors about her at the country club, painting her as a delusional single mother who fabricated tales about Daniel's father to save face. The cruelty was breathtaking, even for Linda. "Did you tell him what we talked about? About your daddy being a soldier far away?" Daniel nodded miserably. "But Tommy said soldiers have names and pictures, and since we don't have any, it means you're lying. He said his mom said you probably don't even know who my real daddy is." Sarah felt something snap inside her chest. She'd been protecting Linda's reputation for years, keeping the truth about Marcus and what really happened buried to maintain peace. But Linda felt no such obligation to protect Sarah or Daniel from her vicious gossip. That night, after tucking Daniel into bed with extra stories and reassurances, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was going to find Marcus, no matter what it took. Daniel deserved to know his father, and she deserved answers about what Linda had really done to destroy their relationship. Sarah started her search the next morning during her lunch break, using the office computer to scour social media and public records. Marcus Holloway had been completely absent from the internet for years, as if he'd vanished into thin air after leaving college. But people didn't just disappear entirely, especially not in the digital age. After hours of searching, Sarah finally found a trail. Marcus had indeed joined the military after his scholarship was revoked, just as his mother had said. But, according to military records she accessed through a Veterans Assistance website, he'd been deployed to Afghanistan for 2 tours before returning stateside and settling in Portland, Oregon. More importantly, he was alive. And, according to his discharge papers, he'd been honorably discharged 3 years ago due to an injury sustained in combat. Sarah's hands trembled as she found his current address through a reverse phone lookup. Marcus Holloway, 34, residing at an apartment complex in downtown Portland. The same Marcus who'd shared his dreams of becoming an engineer, who'd talked about building bridges that would last forever, who'd held her hand during late-night study sessions and promised they'd figure out their future together. But how do you contact someone whose life you've apparently abandoned without explanation? How do you explain that everything they believed about your relationship was a lie constructed by your manipulative mother? Sarah stared at the phone number on her computer screen for 20 minutes before finally writing it down. She didn't call that day, or the next. Instead, she spent a week crafting and recrafting a letter, trying to find words that could bridge 7 years of silence and betrayal. "Dear Marcus," she wrote finally, "I know this will come as a shock, and you have every right to throw this letter away without reading it, but I need you to know that everything you believe about why we broke up is a lie. I never stopped loving you. I never moved on to someone else. I never forgot about you or chose anything over our relationship. Your mother destroyed your scholarship, told you I didn't want to see you anymore, and convinced you you'd join the military to get away from me. I spent 7 years believing you chose to leave, while you've spent 7 years believing I chose to abandon you. We were both victims of the same deception." Sarah paused, her pen hovering over the paper as she debated whether to mention Daniel. In the end, she decided Marcus deserved the whole truth. "There's something else you need to know. I was pregnant when you disappeared. I have a son, our son. His name is Daniel, and he's 6 years old. He has your eyes and your smile, and he asks about his father every day. I've told him he's a soldier serving far away because I didn't know how to explain that I couldn't find you. I'm not asking for anything from you. I'm not trying to disrupt your life or create obligations you never signed up for. I just thought you deserved to know the truth about everything. If you don't want contact with us, I understand completely. But if you do, I'll be waiting." She included her phone number and address, sealed the letter before she could lose her courage, and mailed it the next day. 2 weeks passed with no response. Sarah began to think Marcus had indeed thrown the letter away, that too much time had passed and too much damage had been done for any kind of reconciliation. She was preparing herself for the reality that Daniel might never know his father when her phone rang on a Tuesday evening. "Sarah?" The voice was deeper than she remembered, roughened by time and experience, but unmistakably Marcus. Sarah's knees gave out and she sank onto the couch, tears already streaming down her face. "Marcus, you got my letter." "I got it." His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the emotion underneath. "I've read it about 50 times. I need to know, is this real? Is Daniel really mine?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. "I swear to you, Marcus, everything in that letter is true. I know how crazy it must sound." "It doesn't sound crazy. It sounds like your mother. I always knew she hated me, but I never imagined she'd go that far." They talked for 3 hours that night, filling in the gaps of 7 lost years. Marcus told him about his military service, about the IED explosion that had shattered his left leg and ended his combat career, about the long months of rehabilitation that had left him with a permanent limp, but grateful to be alive. He'd used his GI benefits to finish his engineering degree and now worked for a construction company designing sustainable housing projects. Sarah told him about Daniel, his love of building things with blocks, his fascination with how things worked, his gentle nature and infectious laugh. She described the struggles of single motherhood, the years of poverty and uncertainty, and finally, reluctantly, the current situation with Linda. "She's doing it again," Marcus said quietly, when Sarah explained how Linda was systematically undermining her relationship with Daniel. The same manipulation, the same game control. "She's using your son as a weapon against you." "I know," Sarah said, "but I don't know how to fight her. She has money, resources, time. She's convinced Daniel that she loves him more than I do because she can give him things I can't." "What if you didn't have to fight her alone?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and hope and terror. Sarah hadn't dared to dream that Marcus might want to be involved in their lives after everything that had happened. "What are you saying?" she asked carefully. "I'm saying I lost 7 years with my son because of your mother's lies. I'm not losing any more. If you'll let me, I want to be part of his life, part of both of your lives." Sarah closed her eyes, overwhelmed by emotions she'd kept buried for years. "Are you sure? This isn't going to be easy. Linda won't give up without a fight, and bringing you into the picture will only escalate things." "Good," Marcus said, and for the first time she heard steel in his voice. "It's time someone stood up to her. It's time she faced consequences for what she's done." They made plans for Marcus to visit the following weekend. Sarah was terrified about how to explain his sudden appearance to Daniel, but Marcus had a suggestion that surprised her. "Tell him the truth. Not all of it yet, but tell him I'm his father and that we've been looking for each other for a long time. Kids are more resilient than we think, and he deserves honesty." That week, Sarah prepared Daniel as gently as she could. She started by showing him photos she'd kept hidden for years, pictures of her and Marcus from college, young and happy and in love. "This is your daddy. His name is Marcus, and he's been far away for a long time. But he's coming to meet you this weekend." Daniel studied the photos with intense concentration, his small fingers tracing Marcus's face. "He looks like me," he said finally. "Yes, he does. You have his eyes and his smile. Why has he been gone so long?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes other people make it hard for families to be together. But he's coming now, and he's very excited to meet you." Daniel's face lit up with the kind of pure joy that only children can manage. "Will he stay? Will he live with us?" "I don't know yet, baby. We'll have to see. But I promise you, no matter what happens, you're going to know your daddy." Linda was out of town that weekend, attending a charity retreat at an exclusive resort. Sarah had deliberately planned Marcus's visit during her absence, not wanting their reunion to be overshadowed by Linda's inevitable dramatics. When Marcus arrived Saturday morning, Sarah's first thought was how much he'd changed. The boy she'd loved in college had been lean and eager, all potential energy and bright dreams. The man standing on her doorstep was broader, more solid, with lines around his eyes that spoke of pain and experience. His left leg bore the subtle signs of his injury, a slight stiffness in his gait, a careful way of shifting his weight. But his eyes were the same warm brown she remembered, and when he smiled, she saw the boy she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Hi," he said simply, and Sarah felt her heart break and heal at the same time. "Hi yourself." They stared at each other for a moment, 7 years of separation and pain and longing hanging between them, before Daniel appeared at Sarah's side. "Are you my daddy?" he asked with characteristic 6-year-old directness. Marcus knelt down carefully, bringing himself to Daniel's eye level. "Yes, I am. And you must be Daniel. I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time." Daniel studied his father with the same intense concentration he'd given the photographs. "Mommy said you've been far away. Were you sad you couldn't see me?" "Very sad," Marcus said honestly. "Missing you has been the hardest thing I've ever done." That seemed to satisfy Daniel. "Do you want to see my room? I have a race car bed and a box of Legos and a puzzle with 1,000 pieces." Marcus looked up at Sarah, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I would love to see all of that." They spent the day getting to know each other, and Sarah was amazed by how naturally Marcus fell into the role of father. He listened to Daniel's elaborate explanations of his various toys with complete attention, helped him build an intricate Lego spaceship, and read bedtime stories with the same patience Sarah remembered from their college days when he'd helped her study for exams. That evening, after Daniel had fallen asleep, Sarah and Marcus sat on the back porch, talking softly under the stars. The night air was warm and filled with the scent of Linda's prize-winning roses, but for once, Sarah felt at peace in this house. "He's incredible," Marcus said. "Smart, funny, kind. You've done an amazing job with him." "It wasn't easy," Sarah admitted. "There were times I thought I was failing him completely." "You weren't. He's happy, secure, loved. That's everything." They talked about their plans, about how to integrate Marcus into Daniel's life gradually, about the inevitable confrontation with Linda when she returned from her trip. Marcus had taken a leave of absence from his job and found a short-term rental nearby so he could be close while they figured things out. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked. "Once Linda knows you're here, she's going to declare war. She'll try to destroy your life again, find ways to hurt you through Daniel and me. She won't give up her control without a fight." Marcus reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and calloused from years of construction work. "He's faced down insurgents with rocket launchers," he said quietly. "I think I can handle one vindictive woman no matter how well connected she is." But even as Sarah felt hope blooming in her chest for the first time in years, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Linda had been playing these games for decades, perfecting her techniques for manipulation and control. She wouldn't be caught off guard by Marcus's return, and she certainly wouldn't go down without taking everyone else with her. Linda returned from her retreat Sunday evening, her skin glowing from spa treatments and her mood buoyant from a weekend of being praised by other wealthy women for her charitable contributions. She swept into the house carrying shopping bags full of gifts for Daniel, calling out for her precious grandson in the sing-song voice she used when she wanted to emphasize her role as the loving grandmother. "Grandma Linda!" Daniel came running from the living room where he'd been showing Marcus's collection of toy cars. "Guess what? My daddy's here!" Linda froze in the entryway, her smile becoming fixed and unnatural. "Your daddy?" Daniel nodded enthusiastically, completely oblivious to the sudden tension in the air. "His name is Marcus, and he's really nice, and he knows how to build spaceships, and he says he's going to teach me how to throw a baseball." Linda's eyes found Sarah over Daniel's head, and the look in them was pure murder. "How wonderful," she said through gritted teeth. "Where is this Marcus?" "Right here," Marcus emerged from the living room, moving with the calm confidence of someone who'd faced much worse than an angry suburban matriarch. He extended his hand to Linda with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Patterson, it's been a long time." Linda stared at his outstretched hand as if it were a snake. "Marcus Holloway, I thought you were dead." "Disappointed?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Daniel looked between the adults, sensing something was wrong but not understanding what. "Well," Linda said finally, plastering her fake smile back in place. "Daniel, sweetie, why don't you go upstairs and wash your hands for dinner? The grown-ups need to talk." Daniel looked reluctant to leave, but Sarah nodded encouragingly. Go ahead, baby. We'll be right here. As soon as Daniel disappeared up the stairs, Linda's mask fell away completely. What the hell do you think you're doing? She hissed at Sarah. Bringing him here, filling Daniel's head with fantasies about having a father? Fantasies! Marcus stepped forward, his voice deadly quiet. I am his father, something you made sure he never knew by destroying my life and lying to both of us for 7 years. Linda's laugh was sharp and ugly. Poor little Marcus, still playing the victim. Tell me, what rock did you crawl out from under to come slithering back here? The rock you put me under when you got me kicked out of college and made sure I could never contact Sarah again. I saved her from making the biggest mistake of her life. Look at you, limping around, working construction, living in some hovel. You think that's what she deserved? What Daniel deserves? Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. I think he deserves to know his father. I think Sarah deserved the truth 7 years ago instead of your lies and manipulation. The truth? Linda's eyes glittered with malice. You want the truth? The truth is that Sarah was a naive little girl who thought spreading her legs for the first boy who paid attention to her was love. The truth is that she would have ruined her life and Daniel's if I hadn't intervened. Mom, stop.
Sarah's voice was warning, but Linda was beyond listening. The truth is that I've given Daniel a life you never could have provided. Stability, security, opportunities. I've been more of a parent to him than either of you. By poisoning him against his own mother? Marcus shot back. By turning him into a weapon in your sick games? Linda's composure cracked slightly. I gave him everything he needed. Love, attention, resources. Control, Marcus corrected. You gave him control, just like you tried to do with Sarah. But children aren't possessions, Mrs. Patterson. They're not trophies for you to show off at your country club meetings. Don't you dare lecture me about child rearing, you pathetic excuse for a man. You've been in Daniel's life for all of 5 minutes, and you think you understand what's best for him. I understand that lying to him about his father isn't what's best for him. I understand that manipulating him to choose sides between the adults who love him isn't what's best for him. Linda turned her fury on Sarah. This is your doing. You brought him here to undermine me, to turn Daniel against me after everything I've done for both of you. You haven't done anything for us, Sarah said, finding her voice at last. You've done things to control us. There's a difference. Control? I gave you a home when you had nothing. I gave Daniel opportunities you never could have provided. I loved him when his own father was nowhere to be found. His father was nowhere to be found because you made sure of it, Sarah shot back. You destroyed his life to keep us apart, then spent 7 years making me believe he'd abandon us voluntarily. Linda's smile was cold and triumphant. And it worked, didn't it? Look at you now, still dependent on me, still living in my house, still needing my help to survive. Without me, you'd be back in that slum apartment, working minimum wage jobs, watching Daniel grow up in poverty. Maybe, Sarah said quietly, but at least we'd be free. Something dangerous flickered in Linda's eyes. Free. You want to be free? Fine. Take your soldier boy and get out. But Daniel stays here. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. You can't. I can and I will. I've been his primary caregiver for over a year. I've provided his home, his education, his stability. Any court in the country would agree that removing him from this environment would be detrimental to his welfare. Marcus stepped forward. He's not your child. No, but he's mine in every way that matters. I'm the one who's been here, providing for him, loving him, giving him what he needs to succeed in life. By manipulating him and undermining his mother? By being realistic about what's best for him. Sarah is an emotional child who makes decisions based on feelings rather than facts. I make decisions based on what will give Daniel the best possible future. The best possible future doesn't include knowing his father?
Not if his father is a damaged veteran with no prospects and a hero complex. The insult hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus had risked his life serving his country, had sacrificed his body and his future in the service of something larger than himself, and Linda was using his sacrifice against him. "You're a piece of work," Marcus said quietly. Linda's smile was razor sharp. "I'm a realist, and the reality is that I hold all the cards here. This is my house, purchased with my money. Daniel attends private school on my dime. His clothes, his toys, his medical care, all provided by me. Sarah contributes nothing except emotional instability and poor judgment." "I contribute love," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Love doesn't pay for college tuition. Love doesn't provide security or opportunity or connections that will serve him throughout his life. Love is what makes him feel safe and wanted and worthy, something you wouldn't understand." Linda's laugh was ugly. "Safe? I've given him more safety and security than either of you could dream of providing. Worthy? I've shown him what it means to have standards, to expect the best from life. You've shown him that love comes with conditions, that he's only valuable when he's useful to you. I've shown him reality. The world doesn't care about feelings, Sarah. It cares about results, about success, about having the resources to protect yourself and the people you care about. And what happens when he stops being useful to you? What happens when he grows up and makes choices you don't approve of? Will you destroy his life the way you destroyed ours?" Linda's eyes glittered with something that might have been anticipation. "Daniel is smarter than both of you. He'll make better choices." "Because you'll make sure he doesn't have any other options?" "Because I'll make sure he understands what real love looks like. Unconditional support, unlimited resources, unquestioning loyalty." "That's not love," Sarah said. "That's ownership." She turned on her with sudden viciousness. "Don't lecture me about love, you ungrateful little bitch. I loved you enough to save you from ruining your life. I loved Daniel enough to protect him from your mistakes. By keeping him from his father? By keeping him from a fantasy that will only disappoint him in the end." Marcus stepped forward again. "The only fantasy here is your belief that you can control people's lives without consequences." Her smile was triumphant. "Can't I? Look around, Marcus. I've been controlling Sarah's life for 7 years, and Daniel since the day he was born. I've been controlling yours too, even when you thought you were free of me. One phone call to the right people, and your scholarship disappeared. One conversation with the right military recruiter, and you were shipped off to the other side of the world. I've been pulling strings you didn't even know existed." The casual admission of her manipulation hung in the air like a confession. Sarah stared at her mother in horror, finally understanding the full scope of what Linda had done. "You're proud of it. You're actually proud of destroying people's lives. I'm proud of protecting my family, of making sure Daniel has every advantage in life, even if it means making hard choices that others are too weak to make." "Hard choices?" Marcus's voice was incredulous. "You call ruining people's lives hard choices? I call ensuring my grandson's future hard choices. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." The admission hung between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Linda had just confessed to years of systematic manipulation and control, and she felt no remorse about any of it. But what none of them knew was that Daniel had crept halfway down the stairs to listen to the grown-ups' conversation, and he'd heard every word. His 6-year-old mind couldn't process all the implications of what he'd heard, but he understood enough to know that Grandma Linda had done something very bad to keep his mommy and daddy apart. And hidden in Linda's bedroom safe, locked away with her jewelry and important papers, was a secret that would explain everything. A secret that would finally give Sarah and Marcus the weapon they needed to destroy Linda's carefully constructed world once and for all. The confrontation might have continued indefinitely if Daniel hadn't appeared at the top of the stairs, his small face streaked with tears and confusion. All 3 adults froze as they realized he'd been listening to their heated exchange. "Why is everyone yelling?" Daniel asked in a small voice, clutching his stuffed elephant to his chest. Did I do something wrong? Sarah's heart shattered as she looked at her son's frightened face. This was exactly what she'd been trying to protect him from, the ugly adult conflicts that had nothing to do with him, but everything to do with the people who claimed to love him. No, baby, Sarah said quickly, moving toward the stairs. You didn't do anything wrong. The grown-ups just had a disagreement. But Daniel's eyes were fixed on Linda, and there was something in his expression that Sarah had never seen before. Wariness, as if he was seeing his grandmother clearly for the first time. Grandma Linda, he said slowly, did you really keep my daddy away from me? Linda's face went through a series of rapid changes. Surprise, then calculation, then a return to her practiced grandmother smile. Of course not, sweetheart. Daddy was far away being a soldier. Grandma couldn't control that. But Daniel had inherited more than Marcus's eyes and smile. He'd inherited his intelligence, too, and even at 6 years old, he could sense when adults weren't telling him the truth. But you said you made phone calls, Daniel pressed. You said you controlled things. I heard you. Linda's smile became strained. You misunderstood what you heard, darling. Why don't you go back to your room and play? The grown-ups need to finish talking. Daniel looked between the three adults, his young mind trying to process the tension and anger filling the room. I don't want to go upstairs. I want to stay with Mommy and Daddy. The simple statement hit Linda like a physical blow. After months of positioning herself as Daniel's primary caregiver and most important adult, he was choosing his parents over her in this moment of crisis. Daniel, Linda said, her voice taking on a sharp edge, I said go to your room. No. The word came out quietly, but firmly. You're not my mommy. You can't tell me what to do. Sarah watched in amazement as her 6-year-old son stood up to the woman who had been controlling all their lives. Linda's face went white with rage at being defied by a child, especially in front of Marcus and Sarah. Young man, you will go to your room right now, or there will be consequences. Daniel's chin lifted in a gesture that was pure Marcus. What kind of consequences? Linda's mask slipped completely. The kind that make little boys very sorry they disobeyed their grandmother. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable, and it revealed everything about how Linda really operated. Even with a 6-year-old child, her response to defiance was intimidation and fear. Marcus stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. Did you just threaten my son? Linda realized her mistake immediately. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply explained that actions have consequences. For a 6-year-old who wants to stay with his parents instead of going to his room? For a child who needs to learn respect and obedience. Or what? You'll punish him the way you punished Sarah and me? Linda's eyes flashed with something ugly. Don't test me, Marcus. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I think I'm starting to get a pretty clear picture. The standoff was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Through the window, Sarah could see a sleek black sedan parking behind Marcus's rental car. A moment later, the doorbell rang. Linda's expression shifted to confusion. I wasn't expecting anyone. Sarah went to answer the door, grateful for any interruption to the toxic confrontation. On the doorstep stood a well-dressed woman in her 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Are you Sarah Patterson? Yes, I am. The woman extended a business card. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell. I work for the state's Family Services Department. I believe we need to talk. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Family Services only got involved when someone reported concerns about child welfare. I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. We haven't had any contact with Family Services. Dr. Hartwell smiled sympathetically. Actually, we received a call yesterday from someone claiming to be a concerned neighbor. They reported witnessing what they described as an unstable home environment and possible child endangerment. Sarah's mind raced. Yesterday was when Linda was still at her retreat. There had been no neighbors around, no incidents, nothing that could have prompted such a call. Unless... May I come in? I'd like to speak with you and observe the home environment for myself. Sarah had no choice but to let her in. Dr. Hartwell's trained eyes took in the expensive furnishings, the cleanliness, the obvious wealth of the household. None of it matched the report she had received about poor living conditions and neglect. Linda appeared in the hallway, having quickly composed herself back into her perfect hostess persona. "Oh my, we have a visitor. I'm Linda Patterson, Sarah's mother." Dr. Hartwell introduced herself and explained why she was there. Linda's face went through a complicated series of expressions. Surprise, then calculation, then a return to her practiced grandmother's smile. "Of course not, sweetheart. Daddy was far away being a soldier. Grandma couldn't control that." But Daniel had inherited more than Marcus's eyes and smile. He'd inherited his intelligence, too, and even at 6 years old, he could sense when adults weren't telling him the truth. "But you said you made phone calls," Daniel pressed. "You said you controlled things. I heard you." Linda's smile became strained. "You misunderstood what you heard, darling. Why don't you go back to your room and play? The grown-ups need to finish talking."
Daniel Patterson. That's a nice name. Can you tell me who lives in this house with you? Daniel pointed to each adult in turn. "That's my mommy, Sarah. That's my daddy, Marcus. And that's Grandma Linda." Dr. Hartwell's eyebrows raised slightly. The report she'd received had made no mention of a father being present in the home. "Your daddy lives here too?" Daniel shook his head. "He just came to visit. He's been far away, but now he's here." "And how do you feel about your daddy being here?" Daniel's face lit up with pure joy. "Happy. Really, really happy. We built a spaceship together, and he's going to teach me about baseball, and he knows lots of stories." Dr. Hartwell glanced at Marcus, then back at Daniel. "And how do the grown-ups get along? Do they argue or fight?" Daniel's expression became more serious. "They were yelling before. Grandma Linda was mad that Daddy came back. She said mean things about him." Linda stepped forward quickly. "Children often misunderstand adult conversations." "Let him finish, please," Dr. Hartwell said firmly. She turned back to Daniel. "What kind of mean things?" Daniel looked up at Linda, then back at Dr. Hartwell. "She said Daddy was damaged and that he crawled out from under a rock. She said she controlled things and made Daddy go away before." The words hit the room like a bomb. Dr. Hartwell's expression became very interested, while Linda's face went pale. "Daniel, sweetie," Linda said quickly, "you know how sometimes you hear things wrong when grown-ups are talking?" "I didn't hear it wrong," Daniel said with surprising firmness. "You said you made phone calls and destroyed Daddy's life. I heard you say you were proud of it." Dr. Hartwell stood up slowly, her eyes moving between the adults. The picture she was getting was very different from the report that had brought her here. "Perhaps we could all sit down and discuss the situation," she suggested. They moved to the living room, Linda's perfect entertaining space with its coordinated furniture and expensive artwork. Dr. Hartwell's trained eye took in everything. The family photos that showed Daniel with Linda and Sarah, but no father figure. The expensive toys and clothes that spoke of financial comfort. The tension radiating from all the adults. "Mrs. Patterson," Dr. Hartwell said, addressing Linda, "can you help me understand the family dynamics here? The report I received suggested concerns about the child's welfare, but what I'm seeing and hearing suggests a different situation entirely." Linda's smile was perfectly calibrated. "I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding. Sarah is a wonderful mother, and Daniel is a happy, healthy child. I can't imagine why anyone would report concerns. Yet your grandson just described overhearing conversations about keeping his father away from him. That would certainly be concerning to any neighbor who might have witnessed such conflicts." Linda's composure slipped slightly. "Children often exaggerate or misinterpret what they hear.
Dr. Hartwell turned to Marcus. Mr. Holloway. Marcus Holloway. Mr. Holloway, can you help me understand your role in Daniel's life? Are you his biological father? Yes, I am. I've been out of his life for 7 years due to circumstances beyond my control. But I only recently learned about his existence and came to be part of his life. What circumstances kept you away? Marcus looked at Linda, then back at Dr. Hartwell. I was led to believe that Sarah didn't want to see me anymore. I was told she'd moved on to someone else. At the same time, my college scholarship was revoked under questionable circumstances, and I ended up joining the military. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan before being discharged due to injury. Dr. Hartwell's expression became very serious. And you've only recently learned this information was false? Sarah contacted me 2 weeks ago. She explained that her mother had been responsible for keeping us apart, and that I had a son I'd never known about. Dr. Hartwell turned to Sarah. Is this accurate? Sarah nodded, tears threatening to spill over. My mother destroyed Marcus's scholarship to keep us apart. She told me he'd joined the military to get away from me, and she told him I'd moved on to someone else. I spent 7 years believing he'd abandoned us. These are serious allegations, Dr. Hartwell said, looking at Linda. Do you have a response to these claims? Linda's mask was cracking under the pressure. I made decisions I believed were in my daughter's best interests. Sarah was 19 and pregnant, throwing her future away on a boy with no prospects. I did what any responsible parent would do. By sabotaging his education and lying to both parties about their feelings for each other? By protecting my daughter from a mistake that would have ruined her life. Dr. Hartwell was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing the complex family dynamics she'd walked into. Mrs. Patterson, did you make the call that brought me here today? Linda's hesitation was answer enough, but she tried to maintain her innocence. Of course not. Why would I call family services on my own household? Perhaps to create leverage in a custody dispute, to establish evidence that the child's living situation was unstable when his father returned. The accusation hung in the air like a live wire. Linda's carefully constructed facade was crumbling under Dr. Hartwell's penetrating questions. I would never use a child as a pawn in adult conflicts. Daniel, who had been listening to the conversation with the intense focus children bring to adult discussions that affect them, suddenly spoke up. Grandma Linda, why did you lie? The simple question from his grandfather hit Linda harder than all of Dr. Hartwell's professional inquiries. Daniel was looking at her with confusion and hurt, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. I didn't lie, sweetheart. You said Daddy didn't want me, but he did want me. He just didn't know about me. Linda's composure finally shattered completely.
You don't understand, Daniel. Adults have to make complicated decisions. Sometimes we have to protect people from themselves. By lying to them? By doing what's necessary. Dr. Hartwell watched this exchange with growing concern. What she was witnessing wasn't a stable family environment. It was a pattern of manipulation and control that had damaged multiple generations. Mrs. Patterson, she said firmly, I think we need to discuss your grandson's welfare more thoroughly. Could you join me in the kitchen for a private conversation? Linda shot a venomous look at Sarah and Marcus before following Dr. Hartwell out of the room. As soon as they were gone, Daniel climbed into Sarah's lap, wrapping his small arms around her neck. Mommy, I don't like it when Grandma Linda lies, he whispered. I know, baby. I don't like it either. Will Daddy have to go away again? Sarah looked at Marcus over Daniel's head, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. Not if we can help it. In the kitchen, Dr. Hartwell was having a very different conversation with Linda. Her friendly, professional demeanor had been replaced by something much more serious. Mrs. Patterson, I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you make the call that brought me here? Linda straightened her shoulders, trying to regain some authority.
I'm concerned about my grandson's welfare. If that prompted someone to call your office, then perhaps there are legitimate concerns that need to be addressed. That's not what I asked. Did you make the call yourself? Linda's silence was answer enough. Mrs. Patterson, filing false reports with family services is a serious matter. Using government resources to pursue personal vendettas is not only unethical, it's illegal. Linda's faith hardened. I was protecting my grandson from an unstable situation. His mother has brought a stranger into his life, someone who abandoned them 7 years ago and is now trying to disrupt the stability I've provided. According to everyone's testimony, including the child's, Mr. Holloway didn't abandon anyone. He was systematically deceived about the situation by you. I made decisions based on what I believed was best for my family. You made decisions based on what you believed was best for your control over your family. There's a significant difference. Dr. Hartwell's words hit their target. Linda's carefully maintained image of the devoted grandmother was being stripped away to reveal the ugly manipulator underneath. I've given Daniel everything he needs, Linda said defensively. A stable home, excellent education, opportunities his mother could never provide. You've provided material comforts while systematically undermining his relationship with his mother and keeping him from his father. That's not stability. That's emotional manipulation. Linda's eyes flashed with anger. You don't understand the situation. Sarah is unstable, has always been unstable. She makes emotional decisions without considering consequences. I've been the steady influence in Daniel's life. By poisoning his relationship with his mother? By convincing him you love him more than she does? By threatening consequences when he chooses his parents over you? Each question was like a scalpel, cutting through Linda's justifications to expose the ugly truth underneath. I've never threatened him, Linda protested. I heard you myself, Mrs. Patterson. When Daniel refused to go to his room, you explicitly threatened consequences in front of his parents and a state official. Linda realized her mistake too late. In her anger and frustration, she'd revealed her true nature to exactly the wrong person. Dr. Hartwell leaned forward. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to be very clear about something. Based on what I've observed today, the child in question is not in danger from his parents. The concerning behavior is coming from you. That's ridiculous. You've admitted to systematically deceiving multiple parties to control their relationships. You've made false reports to state agencies. You've emotionally manipulated a child and threatened him when he didn't comply with your wishes. These are serious red flags for psychological abuse. Linda's face went white. I would never abuse Daniel. I love him. Love doesn't involve manipulation, Mrs. Patterson. Love doesn't involve using children as weapons in adult conflicts. What you're describing isn't love. It's possession. The words hung between them like a verdict. Linda had spent years convincing herself that her controlling behavior was motivated by love. But Dr. Hartwell's professional assessment was stripping away that comfortable self-deception. I want you out of my house, Linda said suddenly. I understand you're upset, but this investigation isn't complete. I need to speak with Mr. Holloway and Sarah separately, and I may need to schedule follow-up visits. This is my home. I'm asking you to leave. Dr. Hartwell's expression became very serious. Mrs. Patterson, if you refuse to cooperate with this investigation, I'll have no choice but to escalate this matter. That could result in temporary removal of the child from the home while we sort out the situation. The threat hit Linda like a physical blow. The idea of Daniel being taken away, even temporarily, was more than she could bear. You can't do that. I haven't done anything wrong. You filed a false report, admitted to years of deceptive behavior, and demonstrated a pattern of emotional manipulation toward a child. Any one of those could be grounds for concern about the child's welfare. Linda sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the lines of stress and anger that were etching themselves deeper into her face. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "I want the truth. All of it. About the phone call, about your interference in your daughter's relationship, about your treatment of Daniel, and I want your cooperation in ensuring this child's best interests are protected going forward." In the living room, Sarah, Marcus, and Daniel were having their own conversation. Daniel was full of questions about his father's military service, his injury, and his plans for the future. "Will you stay here with us?" Daniel asked Marcus. Marcus looked at Sarah, seeing the hope and fear warring in her eyes. "I'd like to, if your mom thinks that's a good idea." "I think it's a very good idea," Sarah said softly. "But what about Grandma Linda? She doesn't want you here." It was a fair question from a 6-year-old who is trying to understand the adult conflicts swirling around him. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree," Marcus said carefully, "but the most important thing is what's best for you. And I think what's best for you is having both your mom and dad in your life. Even if Grandma Linda gets mad?"
Even if Grandma Linda gets mad. Daniel considered this seriously. "I love Grandma Linda, but I don't like it when she's mean to you and Mommy." "It's okay to love someone and not like some of the things they do," Sarah said. "That's normal." "Will you still be nice to her even if she's mean to you?" The question showed a maturity beyond Daniel's years, and it broke Sarah's heart that her 6-year-old son was worried about managing adult emotions. "We'll always be respectful," Marcus said, "but we also have to protect ourselves and you from behavior that isn't healthy." Dr. Hartwell returned to the living room with Linda trailing behind her. Linda's perfect composure was gone, replaced by something that looked like defeat. "I need to speak with each of you separately," Dr. Hartwell announced. "Mr. Holloway, could we start with you?" Marcus's interview revealed a man who had spent 7 years believing he'd been abandoned by the woman he loved, only to discover that his entire reality had been constructed by someone else's lies. His military service record, his injury, his struggle to rebuild his life. All of it painted a picture of someone who had overcome significant challenges and was now seeking to be a responsible father. Sarah's interview told the story of a young woman who had been systematically isolated and controlled, first through the destruction of her support system, then through the weaponization of her own child against her. Her love for Daniel and her struggles as a single mother were evident, as was her desperate desire to protect him from the toxic dynamics that had dominated her own childhood. But it was Daniel's interview that provided the most revealing insights. With the natural honesty of a child, he described a household where Grandma Linda was nice to him, but mean to Mommy, where he was showered with gifts but also given subtle messages that his mother wasn't good enough, where love felt conditional on pleasing the right person. "Sometimes Grandma Linda tells me secrets," Daniel confided to Dr. Hartwell. "She says they're just between us, and I shouldn't tell Mommy." "What kind of secrets?" "Like when she gives me extra candy and says not to tell Mommy because Mommy would be upset. Or when she buys me presents and says they're from someone who loves me more than anyone else." Dr. Hartwell's professional alarm bells were ringing loudly. What Daniel was describing was textbook manipulation, creating special relationships through secrecy, undermining the child's relationship with his primary caregiver, and using gifts to create inappropriate loyalty. "How do you feel when Grandma Linda tells you these secrets?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Confused. Because Mommy always says we don't keep secrets in our family, but Grandma Linda says some secrets are okay. What do you think about that?" "I think Mommy is right. Secrets make me feel bad in my tummy." The interview continued for another 20 minutes, with Daniel revealing a pattern of subtle manipulation and boundary violations that would have been invisible to most adults, but were causing genuine distress to the child experiencing them. When Dr. Hartwell finished her interviews, she asked all the adults to reconvene in the living room for her assessment.
Based on my observations and interviews today, she began, I have significant concerns about the family dynamics in this household. However, those concerns are not about the parenting abilities of Sarah or Marcus. Linda's face went rigid. Mrs. Patterson, your behavior toward this child constitutes emotional manipulation. The secrecy, the undermining of his mother's authority, the use of gifts to create inappropriate loyalty, and the obvious attempts to turn him against his father are all forms of psychological abuse. That's absurd. It's also documented. Daniel's own words, along with my observations of his interactions with him, paint a clear picture of manipulative behavior. Dr. Hartwell turned to Sarah and Marcus. You two, on the other hand, demonstrate appropriate parenting instincts, genuine concern for the child's welfare, and a commitment to putting his needs first. She paused, letting her words sink in. Therefore, I'm recommending that custody arrangements be formalized to reflect Daniel's best interests. Sarah should retain primary custody, with Marcus establishing formal paternal rights. Mrs. Patterson, your contact with Daniel should be supervised until you can demonstrate that you understand appropriate boundaries with children. Linda shot to her feet. You can't do this. This is my house. I've provided for this child for over a year. Providing material support doesn't give you the right to emotionally manipulate a child, Mrs. Patterson. In fact, using financial support as leverage in custody disputes is another form of abuse. I want you out of my house, all of you. Dr. Hartwell nodded. That's your right, but I'll be following up to ensure Daniel's living situation remains stable and that he continues to have appropriate access to both his parents. Sarah felt a mix of terror and relief. They were being kicked out, but they were also being freed from Linda's control. We'll need time to find a place, Sarah began. You have until tomorrow evening, Linda said coldly. After that, I'm changing the locks. Marcus stood up. That's fine. We'll be gone tonight. Linda's eyes widened. She had expected Sarah to beg, to negotiate, to compromise. She hadn't expected them to call her bluff. Where will you go? You have no money, no resources? We'll figure it out, Sarah said, surprising herself with her own calm. We always do. As Dr. Hartwell prepared to leave, she pulled Sarah aside. I'm going to give you my direct number. If there are any attempts at harassment or manipulation, I want you to call me immediately. Mrs. Patterson's behavior today suggests someone who doesn't accept limits easily. That evening, as Sarah packed their belongings, she felt an unexpected sense of freedom. Yes, they were leaving behind security and comfort, but they were also leaving behind the toxic environment that had been poisoning all their relationships. Marcus had found them a small, furnished apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. Daniel was excited about the move, treating it like an adventure rather than a displacement. Will we still see Grandma Linda? Asked he as they loaded boxes into Marcus's car. Sometimes, Sarah said, but things are going to be different now. Good different or bad different? Sarah looked at Marcus, who was helping carry their suitcases with the same steady reliability she remembered from college. Good different. Linda watched from her bedroom window as they loaded the car, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. She had been so certain that Sarah would collapse without her support, that she'd come crawling back within days. The possibility that they might actually thrive without her had never seriously occurred to her. As Marcus started the car, Daniel rolled down his window and waved up at Linda's window. Bye, Grandma Linda. I love you. The innocent farewell hit Linda like a dagger. Despite everything that had happened, her grandson still loved her. But for the first time in her life, love wasn't enough to give her control. 6 months later, Sarah, Marcus, and Daniel had settled into their new life with remarkable ease. Marcus had found work with a local engineering firm, impressed by his military experience and practical skills. Sarah had enrolled in a certification program that would allow her to advance in her medical office career. They'd moved to a larger apartment, and Marcus had formally established paternal and custody rights. The legal process had been straightforward once Dr. Hartwell's report was filed, documenting Linda's manipulative behavior and recommending the current arrangement. Linda had tried several times to regain control. She had called Sarah's employer with fabricated concerns about her reliability. She had attempted to contact Daniel's school to question his living arrangements. She even hired a private investigator to look for dirt on Marcus's military service. But every attempt at manipulation failed. Sarah and Marcus had learned to recognize Linda's tactics, and they'd built a support system that couldn't be easily undermined. More importantly, they had taught Daniel to recognize inappropriate behavior and to come to them with any confusing or uncomfortable interactions. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. Sarah was helping Daniel with his homework when her phone rang.
The caller ID showed Linda's number, something that usually filled Sarah with dread. But when she answered, Linda's voice was different, smaller somehow, and strangely vulnerable. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago." Sarah gestured for Marcus to come closer so he could hear the conversation. "What is it, Mom?" Linda was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Marcus isn't the only father you've never known about." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" "I mean, your father, the man you think was your father, wasn't your biological father." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her father had died when she was 15, and his memory was one of the few purely good things from her childhood. He'd been gentle, kind, everything Linda wasn't. "That's not possible," Sarah said. "I had an affair," Linda continued, her voice gaining strength as if confession was somehow liberating her. "It lasted 3 years. Your father never knew. No one knew except me and—" "And who?" Linda's laugh was bitter. "Judge Robert Morrison, your real father." Sarah's legs gave out and she sank onto the couch. Judge Morrison was one of the most prominent figures in our community, a man Linda had often spoken of with obvious admiration. He was also married with a family of his own. "Why are you telling me this now?" Sarah whispered. "Because he's dead. Died last month of a heart attack. And because his widow found some things when she was going through his papers." Sarah's mind was reeling. "What kind of things?" "Letters, pictures, financial records showing payments made to me over the years." She put it together. Marcus reached for Sarah's hand, anchoring her as her world tilted once again. "Mrs. Morrison is demanding a DNA test," Linda continued. "She wants to know if you're really Robert's daughter, and if so, she wants you to know about your inheritance." "My what?" "He left you money, Sarah. A trust fund that was supposed to be activated when you turned 25, but I intercepted the correspondence. There's over $500,000 sitting in an account with your name on it." Sarah stared at the phone in her hand as if it were a snake. Her mother had stolen her biological father's identity from her, hidden her inheritance, and let her struggle in poverty for years while money that belonged to her sat untouched. "You kept this from me," Sarah said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I was protecting you. Robert was married, had a reputation to maintain. If it had come out—" "You were protecting yourself," Sarah interrupted. "You were protecting your secret affair and your reputation as the perfect wife." "I did what I thought was best. You did what was best for you. Just like always." Linda was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Morrison wants to meet you. She wants to do the DNA test and formalize the inheritance if it's proven that you're Robert's daughter." Sarah looked at Marcus, seeing her own shock reflected in his eyes. "When?" "This weekend, if you're willing. She's hired a lawyer, wants everything done properly." After ending the call, Sarah sat in stunned silence. Daniel had continued working on his homework throughout the conversation, but Marcus could see that her world had just shifted on its axis again. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Sarah let out a shaky laugh. "I don't know. I just found out my father wasn't my father. I have a different father who's dead, and apparently I'm supposed to inherit $500,000 from him." "How do you feel about meeting Mrs. Morrison?" Sarah considered the question. "Terrified, but also curious.
If Robert Morrison really was my biological father, I want to know about him and if there's money that belongs to me. She trailed off, thinking about the possibilities. It would change everything, Marcus said quietly. It would give us choices, real choices, not the kind Linda offers where every option comes with strings attached. The DNA test confirmed what Linda's confession had suggested. Sarah was indeed Robert Morrison's biological daughter, conceived during a 3-year affair that had ended when Sarah was 2 years old. Judge Morrison had quietly provided financial support over the years, money that Linda had used to maintain her lifestyle while letting Sarah believe they were dependent on her deceased husband's modest insurance policy. Mrs. Morrison turned out to be a gracious woman in her 70s who seemed genuinely pleased to discover her late husband's daughter. She'd suspected the affair years ago, but had chosen to maintain her marriage for the sake of their children. Now, with Robert gone and their children grown, she felt it was important to acknowledge Sarah and ensure she received what her father had intended for her. The inheritance was substantial, not just the $500,000 in the trust fund, but also a portion of Judge Morrison's estate that Mrs. Morrison insisted Sarah should have. More than the money, though, was the revelation of who Robert Morrison had been. He was a good man, Mrs. Morrison told Sarah as they sat in her elegant living room, surrounded by photos of a life Sarah had never been part of. Flawed, certainly, but fundamentally decent. He spoke about you often in his later years, worried about how you were doing, wished he could be part of your life. Why didn't he try to contact me directly? Mrs. Morrison's smile was sad. Because your mother made it clear that any attempt to disrupt her family would result in public exposure of the affair. She used his reputation and his family's privacy as leverage to maintain control over the situation. Even in death, even in disgrace, Linda had been manipulating people to maintain her version of reality. But the most shocking revelation came when Mrs. Morrison handed Sarah a manila envelope filled with letters. "These are letters Robert wrote to you over the years," she explained. "Birthday letters, Christmas letters, letters about your graduations and achievements. He wrote them faithfully, but never sent them because your mother forbade contact." Sarah opened the first letter with trembling hands. It was dated on her 5th birthday and written in neat handwriting that spoke of a careful, thoughtful man. "My dear Sarah, today you turn 5 years old, and I wish more than anything that I could be there to celebrate with you. I think about you every day, wonder what kind of little girl you're becoming, hope that you're happy and safe and loved." There were dozens of letters, chronicling a father's love from a distance, his pride in her achievements that he'd learned about through careful observation, his regret about the circumstances that kept them apart. "He followed your life as much as he could," Mrs. Morrison explained. "Your school plays, your graduation, even Daniel's birth. He was so proud when he learned you'd kept the baby despite the pressure to make other choices."
Sarah looked up from the letters, tears streaming down her face. He knew about Daniel? He knew about everything. Your mother's manipulations, her control over your life, the way she destroyed your relationship with Daniel's father. He wanted to intervene, but she threatened to destroy his family if he interfered. The picture that emerged was of a man trapped by his own mistakes, forced to watch his daughter struggle from afar while being powerless to help. But he'd done what he could, setting aside money for her future, documenting his love in letters he hoped she'd someday read, and apparently leaving behind evidence of Linda's decades of manipulation. "There is something else," Mrs. Morrison said carefully. "Something Robert discovered about your mother that he felt you should know about someday." She handed Sarah another envelope, this one sealed and marked with Sarah's name in Robert's handwriting. "He asked me to give this to you if anything ever happened to him, and if you ever learned the truth about your parentage. I haven't read it, but he said it contained information that would help you understand your mother's behavior." Sarah stared at the envelope, afraid of what new revelations it might contain. Her entire understanding of her family, her history, her identity had been shattered and rebuilt twice in the span of a week. She wasn't sure she could handle any more earth-shattering truths. But Marcus squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Whatever it says, we'll face it together." Sarah opened the envelope carefully, revealing several pages of Robert's neat handwriting, along with photocopies of official documents. "My dear Sarah,
If you're reading this, it means you've learned the truth about our relationship and the circumstances that kept us apart. There's more you need to know about your mother. Information that I hope will help you understand why she behaves the way she does and protect yourself from further manipulation. Your mother, Linda, was not born Linda Patterson. She was born Linda Catherine Hoffman in a small town in Ohio, the daughter of an unwed teenage mother who gave her up for adoption when she was 3 years old. The family that adopted her was religious, strict, and emotionally abusive. They raised her to believe that love was conditional, that worth was determined by appearances, and that control over others was the only path to security. When Linda turned 18, she discovered that her birth mother had died in a car accident when Linda was 12, leaving behind a substantial inheritance that Linda's adoptive parents had been collecting on her behalf. She sued them for the money, won, and used it to reinvent herself completely. She moved across the country, created a new identity as the well-bred daughter of a deceased wealthy family, and set about building the perfect life she felt she deserved. Your father, the man you knew as your father, was her first major conquest. He was older, established, kind-hearted, and completely taken in by her fabricated background and sob story about being orphaned young. She married him not for love, but for the stability and respectability he represented. But Linda was never satisfied with what she had. She needed constant validation, constant proof that she was worthy of love and respect. That's what drove her to the affair with me. Not passion, but the thrill of controlling a man who was supposedly beyond her reach. She collected conquests the way other people collect trophies, using them to prove to herself that she was special, worthy, better than the abandoned child she'd once been. When she became pregnant with you, she saw an opportunity to create the perfect family she'd always dreamed of. A child she could mold completely, who would never leave her or disappoint her the way everyone else in her life had. But when your father died unexpectedly when you were 15, Linda's carefully constructed world began to crumble. She'd spent so many years playing roles that she'd lost track of who she really was underneath it all. The fear of being abandoned again, of being revealed as a fraud, of losing control over the narrative of her life, it drove her to increasingly desperate measures to maintain her grip on reality. This is why she destroyed your relationship with Marcus. It wasn't really about his background or prospects, it was about losing control over you. If you had a life partner who loved you unconditionally, you wouldn't need her anymore. You might even see through her manipulations and leave her behind. And this is why she's used Daniel as a weapon against you. He represents her last chance to create the perfect, controllable family she's always craved. In her mind, if she can convince him that she loves him more than you do, if she can position herself as her primary caregiver and most important relationship, she'll finally have someone who will never abandon her. The documents enclosed are copies of records I obtained through a private investigator. Birth certificates, adoption papers, court records from her lawsuit against her adoptive parents, evidence of the identity fraud she committed when she moved and reinvented herself. I'm not giving you this information to hurt your mother, but to help you understand that her behavior comes from a deep psychological damage. Linda is not evil, Sarah. She's a profoundly broken person who never learned how to form healthy relationships or trust that love can exist without control. But understanding the source of her brokenness doesn't mean you have to accept its consequences in your own life. You have the right to protect yourself and your son from her manipulation. You have the right to build relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. You have the right to break the cycle of control and emotional abuse that has defined your family for too long. Use this information wisely. Her entire identity is built on lies and carefully maintained appearances. If necessary, you can use what you know to protect yourself and Daniel from further manipulation. But more importantly, use it to understand that her treatment of you has never been about your worth as a person. It's been about her own desperate need for control. You are worthy of love without conditions. You are capable of building a healthy, happy life for yourself and your son. Don't let her brokenness become your inheritance. With all my love and regret for the years we lost, your father, Robert Morrison. Sarah set the letter down with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she'd just learned. Everything about her mother, her perfect mannerisms, her obsession with appearances, her need to control everyone around her, suddenly made sense in the most heartbreaking way possible. She's been playing a character her entire adult life, Sarah said quietly. The perfect wife, the devoted mother, the pillar of the community, none of it was real. Marcus read over the documents Robert had provided, his expression growing more serious with each page. These adoption records, the court case, it's all here. She really did reinvent herself. Mrs. Morrison nodded sadly. Robert spent years trying to understand her behavior, especially after you were born. He said once that loving Linda was like holding water in his hands. The harder he gripped, the more she slipped away. Sarah thought about her childhood, about Linda's obsession with maintaining the perfect household, her need for constant praise and validation from neighbors and friends, her terror of anyone seeing cracks in her facade. It had all been an elaborate performance designed to convince herself as much as others that she was worthy of love. "What am I supposed to do with this information?" Sarah asked. "Whatever you think is best," Mrs. Morrison replied. But Robert was right about one thing. Knowledge is power. Understanding why someone behaves the way they do doesn't excuse their behavior, but it can help you protect yourself from it. Over the following weeks, Sarah struggled with what to do about her newfound knowledge. Part of her felt compassion for the abandoned child Linda had once been, the traumatized girl who had grown into a woman incapable of forming healthy relationships. But a larger part of her was angry about the decades of manipulation and control she'd endured as a result of Linda's unresolved trauma. The decision was made for her when Linda attempted one final power play. Daniel had been attending a new school for several months and had made friends with a boy named Tyler, whose father happened to be a family court judge. When Linda learned about this connection through her network of country club contacts, she saw an opportunity to regain control over the custody situation. She approached Tyler's father with a carefully crafted story about being a concerned grandmother whose daughter was living with an unstable veteran who posed a danger to her innocent grandson. She provided just enough truth mixed with strategic lies to paint Marcus as a potentially violent threat and Sarah as an unfit mother who prioritized her relationship over her child's safety. Judge Williams, who had only heard Linda's version of events, agreed to review the custody arrangement informally. He called Sarah and Marcus in for what he described as a friendly consultation about Daniel's living situation. Sarah and Marcus arrived at the courthouse confused and concerned, not understanding why their custody arrangement, which had been working perfectly for months, was suddenly being questioned. Judge Williams' demeanor was polite but skeptical as he questioned them about their relationship, Marcus's military service, and their future plans. It became clear that someone had been feeding him biased information when he asked pointed questions about Marcus's anger management issues and Sarah's history of poor judgment in relationships. "I'm sorry," Marcus said finally, "but I think there's been some misunderstanding. I don't have anger management issues, and I've never been violent or threatening towards anyone in my family." Judge Williams consulted his notes. "I have information suggesting otherwise. A concerned family member has expressed worry about your fitness as a guardian." Sarah's blood turned to ice as she realized what had happened. "Your Honor, may I ask who provided this information? I'm not at liberty to reveal my sources, but the concerns seem legitimate enough to warrant a review." Sarah looked at Marcus, seeing her own recognition in his eyes. This was Linda's final gambit, using her social connections and carefully crafted lies to destroy their family through legal channels. "Your Honor," Sarah said carefully, "I believe my mother may have provided you with incomplete or inaccurate information about our situation." Judge Williams's